raised slightly from the ground. The Prophet ﷺ's foot was, the indent of his foot was slightly more than normal, but not too much, to a point where it would become problematic. Khumsan al-Akhmasayn. The feet of the Prophet ﷺ was described to be such that there was no indentations in his feet. Right? So they said if water had to be poured on his feet, it would roll off. Nothing would be standing on his foot by itself, like a puddle piling. And then they described the walking of the Prophet ﷺ, but we have an entire chapter that speaks of his walking. So I'm not going to discuss his walking here. And had it not been for my broken ankle, I would have tried to demonstrate to you how the Prophet ﷺ walked. So maybe I can get one of the other students or Maulanas to do that for us, inshallah ta'ala. The Prophet ﷺ, whenever he directed himself to somebody, turned to somebody, iltafata jami'an. One of the bad qualities many people have, I always think, I was on Hajj many years ago and I met some scholars or teachers or ustaz, whatever it is, and I found it almost offensive. Even though a young man such as myself cannot find the action of any scholar to be offensive, but just the way people are. Sometimes you come to greet somebody and the person doesn't give you his attention. So all he does is he does this, he greets you from the side. Right? The Prophet ﷺ never ever greeted someone from the side. Whenever somebody approached him, he turned his entire body to that person. He faced that person with his full front of his body. And when he shook somebody's hand, the Prophet ﷺ was never the first person to pull his hand away. He waited till that person pulled his hand away. Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. And the idea of giving someone your attention is one of the reasons that I share a very close and good relationship with Shaykh Ibrahim Gabriels. One of the reasons why we love him so dearly, because as a young man growing up in the community, there was never a time when I met Shaykh Ibrahim except that he made you feel special. Not just me, any youngster. He would come to you, he would greet you, he would hug you, he would ask you how's your father, how's your family. These are prophetic qualities. If you and I implement these qualities in our interactions with people, we will observe an immediate change within our surroundings. We will find that we'll have more friends, we'll have more associates. People will like our company more. I will like the company of others. Right? Just by adopting from the small etiquettes of the Messenger Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, at most times his gaze was fixed to the ground. نظره إلى الأرض أطول من نظره إلى السماء. He would gaze more to the ground than what he would gaze to the heavens. They said about him, دائم الفكر. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, his mind was always occupied. Occupied with what? Thinking. How can he bring about change? How can he deliver this message to all of humanity? دائم الفكر. Like my brother Yusuf, sometimes with his social media, he's دائم الفكر. He messages me at the weirdest time of the morning and night. Sheikh, what about this? What about that? No. دائم الفكر. A person whose objective is the objective of Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who wants to connect creation to the Creator, is always thinking, how can I bring about change? How can I arrange a gathering of dhikr at my school? How can I arrange a lecture program at my school? How can I create a program at my masjid? How can I gather my family on a monthly or weekly basis? How can I? Because he's constantly thinking of ways and means. How can I draw close to Allah and connect others to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? And that was Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. The Prophet ﷺ again is speaking about the walk of Rasul ﷺ. I don't want to speak about that now. I said we're going to get to it at a later stage. Rasul ﷺ, another of his qualities was that he would always hasten to greet first. He wouldn't wait till somebody comes to greet him. He wouldn't hasten. The idea of sitting and waiting for somebody to come and greet you speaks of an ailment within our hearts. Speaks of an ego. Hy kan vir my groet. Ek is oura so, of ek is die sheikh, of ek het gestudy, of ek kan Quran baca, of ek, or whatever it is. That speaks of an ailment within the heart. Right? Rasul sallallahu alayhi wasallam, the best of Allah's creations, Allah will never ever, will never ever create anyone and anything like him. Sallallahu alayhi wasallam used to hasten to be the first one to greet. Initiating a greeting in Islam is wajib or sunnah, compulsory or recommended? Sunnah. Responding to a greeting is wajib. To start a greeting, assalamu alaikum, sunnah. To respond to the greeting is wajib. This is one of the rare instances within our sharia where sunnah gets preference over wajib. Because the Prophet ﷺ said, وَخَيْرُهُمَا, the best of the two that greeted, man bada bi salam, the one who initiated the greeting. And we sometimes in Cape Town, we're very lazy to greet. So these were from the descriptions of the Messenger Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Imam Tirmidhi produced a hadith over here, and it's important for me to quote this one because it's unbelievable. The time we are living in is one of the weirdest times that this ummah has ever passed through because of ideologies that has crept into this ummah. From the ideologies that has crept into this ummah, there was those that said, why are you detailing the description of Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam so much? That is not from the sunnah. The Prophet didn't do that. Hey, mashallah, you understand deen better than the Sahaba. Because the Sahaba described the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But in case you don't want to take deen from the Sahaba, and you only want to take deen from Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Imam Tirmidhi produces a narration here, how the Prophet described the Anbiya alayhi salatu wasallam. So the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, I met the Anbiya, because he met them. He saw them in his dreams, and he met them in a wakeful state. On the occasion of Isra and Mi'raj, he met them. And then he said that Nabi Musa alayhi salatu wasalam, he resembled the people that came from the Yemeni tribe known as the men of Shanu'a. And then the men of Shanu'a was known for their description. They were moderate in stature, they were not overly large people, they weren't very small, and so forth and so on. He said, I saw Isa ibn Maryam, and the closest person that resembled him was Urwa ibn Mas'ud. If you look at Urwa ibn Mas'ud, then it's as if you're looking at Sayyidina Isa alayhi salatu wasalam. Now, and that was Urwa ibn Mas'ud al-Thaqafi. He said that I saw Nabi Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam. And Nabi Ibrahim is that prophet that is respected and loved by all religions, all Abrahamic faiths. And he said that the closest person in resemblance to Nabi Ibrahim, he said, is I. He said, I saw Jibreel alayhi salam when he took the form of a man, and the closest person that resembled him was Dihya al-Kalbi. So if the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam gave descriptions of angels and Anbiya, then why can we not describe Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam? Abu Tufail was the last companion that lived on this earth. Rasul sallallahu alayhi wasallam, one day he said that 100 years from now, from today, not a single person living on this earth will be alive. Currently alive will be alive 100 years from now. And they listed the day when the Prophet ﷺ uttered those words, and 100 years thereafter, not a single person that was alive at that time was still alive. And the last person to die, exactly 100 years after the Prophet ﷺ, from the companions radiallahu ta'ala anhum, ridwanullahi ta'ala alayhim ajma'in, the last companion to die after Rasul sallallahu alayhi wasallam passed away exactly 100 years after the Prophet ﷺ made that statement, and his name was Abu Tufail, Amir ibn Wathila. Who's going to remember that name, Amir ibn Wathila? Your memory is something that is, your memory can shock you. Your memory can shock you if you're serious about putting something to memory. Which reminds me about something, but I'm not going to get into it now. So Amir ibn Wathila, the last Sahabi alive, he said, I saw the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and there is no one alive on earth today that saw him besides me. So they said, describe him to me, and he described the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in a very brief description. He said he was fair in complexion. He was the most handsome person. Muqassadan, he was moderate in every feature of his sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And the last hadith we covered. The next chapter now, we still have time, right? The next chapter speaks about the Khatam al-Nubuwah. The seal of Khatam al-Nubuwah means, or Khatam al-Nubuwah means the seal of prophethood. But when we speak about the Khatam al-Nubuwah in this context, it refers to a physical seal that existed on the back of the Messenger Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Has anyone heard of the Khatam al-Nubuwah before? Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam had a physical seal on his back. The middle of the back, you shall look, everyone is looking at people with their backs facing to you. So picture the middle of somebody's back towards the left. That's where the Khatam of Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam existed. Opposite the heart that we have. What was the Khatam? Imam Tirmidhi is going to be speaking about it in this chapter. And at the end of this chapter, he's going to narrate to us the hadith of Salman al-Farisi. Who has heard the hadith of Salman al-Farisi before? So there is not too many hadith in this chapter, so we're going to read through it inshallah very quickly and then we'll comment on them. باب ما جاء في خاتم النبوة وبه لي قال حدثنا أبو رجاء كتيبة بن سعيد قال حدثنا حاتم بن إسماعيل عن الجعد بن عبد الرحمن قال سمعت سائب بن يزيد يقول ذهبت بي خالتي إلى النبي صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم فقالت يا رسول الله ابن أختي وجع فمسح صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم رأسي ودعا لي بالبركة وتوضأ فشربت من وضوئه وقمت خلف ظهري فنظرت إلى الخاتم بين كتفيه فإذا هو مثل زر الحجلة وبه قال حدثنا سعيد بن يعقوب الطالقاني قال أخبرنا أيوب بن جابر عن سماك بن حرب عن جابر بن سمرة رضي الله تعالى عنه قال رأيت الخاتم بين كتفي رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم غدة حمراء مثل بيضة الحمامة وبه قال حدثنا أبو مصعب المديني قال حدثنا يوسف بن الماجشون عن أبي عن عاصم بن عمر بن قتالة عن جدته رميثة رضي الله تعالى عنها قالت سمعت رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم ولو أشاء أن أقبل الخاتم الذي بين كتفيه من قربه لفعلت يقول لسعد بن معاذ يوم مات اهتز له عرش الرحمن وبه قال حدثنا أحمد بن عبدة الضبي وعلي بن حجر وغير واحد قالوا أنبأنا عيسى بن يونس عن عمر بن عبد الله مولى غفر قال حدثني إبراهيم بن محمد من ولد علي بن أبي طالب رضي الله تعالى عنهم قال كان علي إذا وصف رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم فذكر الحديث بطوله وقال بين كتفي خاتم النبوة وخاتم النبيين وبه قال حدثنا محمد بن بشار قال حدثنا أبو عاصم قال حدثنا عزرة بن ثابت قال حدثني الباء بن أحمر اليشكري قال حدثني أبو زيد عمرو بن أخطب الأنصاري قال لي رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم يا أبا زيد أدن مني فامسح ظهري فمسح ظهره فوقعت أصابعي على الخاتم قلت وما الخاتم قال شعرات مجتمعات وبه قال حدثنا أبو عمار الحسين بن حريث الخزاعي قال حدثنا علي بن حسين بن واقد قال حدثني أبي قال حدثني عبد الله بن بريدة قال سمعت أبي بريدة يقول جاء سلمان الفارسي إلى رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم حين قدم المدينة بمائدة عليها رطب فوضعت بين يدي رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم فقال يا سلمان ما هذا فقال صدقة عليك وعلى أصحابك فقال ارفعها فإنا لا نأكل صدقة قال فرفعها فجاء الغد بمثله فوضعه بين يدي رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم فقال ما هذا يا سلمان فقال هدية لك فقال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم لأصحابه أبسطوا ثم نظر إلى الخاتم على ظهر رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم فآمن به وكان لليهود فاشتراه رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم بكذا وكذا درهما على أن يغرس لهم نخلا فيعمل سلمان فيه حتى تطعم فغرس رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم النخيل إلا نخلة واحدة غرسها عمر فحملت النخل من عامها ولم تحمل النخلة فقال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم ما شأن هذه النخلة فقال عمر يا رسول الله أنا غرستها فنزعها رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم فغرسها فحملت من عامها وبه قال حدثنا محمد بن بشار قال حدثنا بشر بن الوضاح قال أنبأنا أبو عقيل الدورقي عن أبي نضرة العوقي قال سألت أبا سعيد الخدري رضي الله تعالى عنه عن خاتم رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم يعني خاتم النبوة فقال كان في ظهره بضعة ناشزة. وبه قال حدثنا أحمد بن المقدام أبو الأشعث العجلي البصري قال حدثنا حماد بن زيد عن عاصم بن الأحول عن عبد الله بن سرجس قال أتيت رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم وهو في أناس من أصحابه فدرت هكذا من خلفي فعرف الذي أريد فألقى الرداء عن ظهري فرأيت موضع الخاتم على كتفي مثل الجمع حولها خيلان كأنها ثآليل فرجعت حتى استقبلته فقلت غفر الله لك يا رسول الله فقال ولك. فقال القوم استغفر لك رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم فقال نعم ولكم ثم تلا هذه الآية واستغفر لذنبك وللمؤمنين والمؤمنات. That's 7 hadith from the chapter dealing with the seal of prophethood on the back of Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The description of the companions regarding the khatam differs. There is who has heard before somebody speaking about the khatam at the back of Rasul? The khatam was a protruding piece of flesh. And that protruding piece of flesh on the back of Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam was a sign of prophethood. When Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam was described in previous scriptures, one of the things mentioned about him, Ahmad and Muhammad, was the fact that he has a protruding piece of flesh on his back, towards the left side of his back, and that's a sign